I am 63 years old and I have cancer. And suddenly everybody wants to be sorry. Everybody. People I haven't spoken to in 5 years, 10 years, 17 years. People whose phone numbers I deleted, whose Christmas cards I threw away unopened, whose names I trained myself to say with a hard edge, so nobody would mistake my silence for missing them. Now they're writing me letters. Now they want peace. Now that I'm dying, everyone has found their courage. I'm lying in a hospital bed in my living room. Not the hospital, my living room. We rented the bed 3 weeks ago when it became clear I wasn't going back to sleeping upstairs. The couch got pushed against the wall. The coffee table is in the garage. There's a medical bed where my family used to sit and watch television. And the room smells like adhesive tape and the faint chemical sweetness of whatever they coat these mattress pads with, and carpet that hasn't been properly vacuumed since the bed frame blocked the floor. On the table beside me, the same table where we used to keep the TV remote and a bowl of mixed nuts, there's a water pitcher, a bottle of pain medication with a child safety cap I can barely open with these hands, and a stack of envelopes, 7 of them, different sizes, different handwriting. Some addressed formally, full name, return address, stamp placed precisely in the corner. Some with just my first name written on the front in handwriting I'd know anywhere, even after years of pretending I'd forgotten it. None of them opened. They're held together by a thin rubber band, the same kind my mother used to wrap around grocery money, that flimsy, tan-colored band that stretches too easy and snaps when you least expect it. It's losing its grip. The band, I mean. Stretching thin around the edges of the envelopes, barely holding. There's a metaphor in that, and I'm not going to pretend I don't see it. These letters started arriving 2 weeks after the diagnosis went public. Word travels fast when you're dying, faster than it ever traveled when you were living. 7 people, 7 apologies I didn't ask for, didn't invite, didn't earn, and I haven't opened a single one. Not because I'm too sick, not because my hands shake too much or my eyes are too tired, because I'm too ashamed. Ashamed that it took my body rotting to make people reach out, and ashamed, more ashamed, that it took my body rotting to make me wish I'd reached out first. Let me tell you about the man who earned that stack, the man I was before the bed, before the diagnosis, before the letters came. I was a scorekeeper. That's the most honest thing I've ever said about myself, and it's the ugliest. I kept score. Every slight, every disagreement, every time someone let me down, or crossed a line, or said something I decided was unforgivable, I filed it. I cataloged it. I stored it in a place inside myself where it couldn't decay or soften or fade with time. I maintained my grudges the way other people maintain their homes, with attention, with dedication, with pride. I cut off my brother in 2006, a property dispute, our parents' land, a boundary line that mattered on paper and shouldn't have mattered between blood. We argued. He said something I decided was the last thing he'd ever say to me. I hung up the phone and I didn't call him again. 17 years, my own brother, over a line drawn in dirt. I stopped speaking to my best friend from college over a business deal that went sideways. We'd been friends for 22 years, stood in each other's weddings. He made a decision I disagreed with. I told him he'd betrayed my trust. He tried to explain. I didn't let him finish the sentence. I walked out of a restaurant and let 22 years of friendship cool on the table next to an unfinished plate of pasta. I froze out a co-worker who got the promotion I wanted. Not a confrontation, just ice. I stopped saying good morning, stopped holding the elevator, stopped being a person to her, and started being a wall. She didn't take my job. She earned hers. I couldn't see the difference because the scoreboard in my head had her name in a column she didn't belong in. My wife tried. For years she tried. Just call him. Just talk to her. It's been long enough. She'd bring it up gently, the way you bring up something you know will be swatted away, but you say it anyway because love makes you stupid enough to keep trying. And I'd shut it down every time. They know where I am. I'm not the one who should apologize. When they're ready to admit they were wrong, I'll listen. She stopped trying eventually. You can only throw a rope to someone who refuses to grab it so many times before your arms give out. I believed something that I need you to hear, because you might believe it too. I believed that if I forgave someone, I lost. That forgiveness was surrender. That the first person to say I'm sorry was the first person to admit they were weak. I thought holding a grudge was holding ground. I thought stubbornness was dignity. I thought the silent treatment was a form of strength, when really it was just a man standing alone in an empty field, guarding a fence nobody was trying to climb. The smell of pride is odorless. You can detect it on yourself. Everyone around you can smell it. Your wife, your kids, your friends, the people you've cut off. They can smell it from across the years. But you think you smell fine. You think you smell like principle, like backbone, like a man who doesn't bend. You smell like loneliness. You just can't tell. Now let me tell you about the letters. I need to go slowly here, because this is where the shame lives, and shame doesn't move fast. It sits heavy and makes you feel every ounce. 2 weeks after the diagnosis, a Tuesday, my wife brought the mail in and set it on the bed the way she always does. A small stack, mostly medical bills and insurance correspondence. But at the bottom of the pile, there was a plain white envelope, handwritten address, no return name in the corner. But I knew the handwriting before I finished reading the first letter of my name. My brother. I picked up the envelope and held it. The paper was ordinary, cheap, drugstore stationery, the kind of envelope that costs nothing. The handwriting was the same handwriting I'd seen on birthday cards when we were kids, on the sign-in sheet at our mother's funeral, on the property documents that started the war. His hand, his pen, his decision to sit down somewhere and write something to the brother who'd hung up on him 17 years ago and never called back. The room was dim. Afternoon light came through the half-closed blinds, casting striped shadows across the blanket on my legs. The oxygen concentrator beside the bed hummed, that low, steady mechanical rhythm that's become the soundtrack of my days. The air tasted dry from the machine. My wife was in the kitchen. I could hear the faucet running. I turned the envelope over, ran my thumb along the sealed flap, felt the ridge of the glue, pressed my thumbnail into the corner where you'd normally start to tear it open. I didn't open it. I set it on the table, face down, and I stared at the ceiling. The next day, another letter arrived, different handwriting. My college friend, the one I'd walked out on over pasta and a business deal. The day after that, 2 more. A cousin I'd argued with at a family reunion 8 years ago. A former business partner I'd accused of disloyalty and never spoken to again. Then 3 more over the following week. People I'd cut off, people I'd frozen out, people who had probably thought about calling for years, but didn't because I'd made it clear through silence, through ice, through the pure radioactive stubbornness I carried like a weapon, that the door was closed and bolted, and I was on the other side with my arms crossed. Word travels when you're dying, and illness does something strange to people. It makes them brave. It strips away the pride that keeps the phone in the drawer and the words in the throat. Cancer is an alarm clock that doesn't just wake up the person who has it. It wakes up everyone who ever loved them and makes them count backward through the things they never said. 7 letters. I stacked them. I found a rubber band in the kitchen drawer, flimsy, barely stretchy, and I wrapped it around the bundle and placed it on the bedside table. And every night, lying in this bed, I stare at that stack. Here's what destroys me. Not that they're apologizing, not that they found the courage I never found. What destroys me is this. Most of these arguments were small, forgettable, ordinary disagreements that I promoted to wars and decorated with permanence. I can barely remember what started the silence with my brother. Something about where the fence line fell, a property boundary, 12 feet of dirt. I destroyed a 40-year relationship, birthday dinners, Thanksgiving tables, phone calls on Sunday mornings. The only other person alive who remembers what our mother's kitchen smelled like. Over 12 feet of dirt that neither of us even uses. Those letters represent 7 relationships I could have repaired with a single phone call. Any Tuesday, any afternoon, any moment during the years, the healthy, strong, full of time years, when I had a steady voice and working hands and all the energy I'd ever need to pick up the phone and say 4 words. I was wrong, or even just 2 words. I'm sorry. Forgiveness would have cost me nothing. Nothing. Not money, not status, not pride. Because pride, I've learned from this bed, has no market value. You can't spend it. You can't trade it in. You can't hand it to the doctors and say, "Here, use this instead of chemo." I charge myself everything for something worth nothing. The stack has grown. 9 letters now. The rubber band is straining. My wife places each new arrival on the pile without comment, without expression, without the satisfaction of saying, "I told you so," even though she's earned that phrase more times than I can count. Visitors come, neighbors, church people, my wife's friends. They bring food I can barely eat and flowers I can barely smell, and kind words that float above me like clouds I can't reach. But the 7, the 9, they don't come. They're waiting. They send their words on paper, and they're waiting for a response from the man who was always too proud to go first. They went first this time, and I'm still lying here, holding the line. My brother called last week. My wife answered in the kitchen. I heard her say, "He's resting right now. I'll tell him you called." She came into the living room and told me. I nodded. She set the phone on the table next to the letters, and she walked away without saying what we both knew, that I wasn't resting. I was lying 3 feet from a phone and a stack of open hands, and I was choosing the ceiling instead. The scoreboard I kept my whole life, the one I maintained with such devotion, such precision, such righteous dedication, I can see it clearly now from this bed, and it's blank. Nobody was counting but me. Nobody was keeping track. Nobody was playing the game I thought I was winning. I was the only player on a court in an empty stadium, racking up points that appeared on no one's screen but my own. The oxygen hums, the clock ticks, the rubber band stretches thinner every day, and the man who kept score his entire life is finally reading the final tally. 0. 0 to 0. A lifetime tie in a game that never existed. Now I'm talking to you. You've got someone, don't you? A brother, a sister, a friend. Someone you cut off over something you can barely remember. Something that felt enormous at the time. And now, if you're honest, if you're truly painfully honest, you couldn't fill a napkin with the details. You're waiting for them to go first. You're waiting for the call, the letter, the text. You're telling yourself that when they apologize, you'll consider it. You'll think about it. You'll graciously weigh their words and maybe extend the privilege of your forgiveness. You're going to be waiting a long time. And one day, one of two things will happen. Either you'll get sick and suddenly the letters will come, and you'll be lying in a bed, staring at envelopes you're too ashamed to open. Or they'll get sick, and you'll be the one sitting at a kitchen table with a pen and a cheap envelope, writing words you should have said out loud 10 years ago to someone who might not be awake to read them. Don't write a letter. Call tonight. Pick up the phone and dial the number you deleted, but still remember, because you've never really forgotten it, have you? Let your voice shake. Let the words come out wrong. Let there be a silence on the other end that feels like it lasts a century. And then say it. I'm sorry, and I should have said it years ago. It doesn't matter who was right. It never mattered who was right. Right doesn't visit you in the hospital. Right doesn't hold your hand during chemo. Right doesn't call your wife to ask how you're doing. 9 letters on my table. 9 people brave enough to go first. And I'm lying here, dying, still too proud to open them. Don't be the man with the stack. Be the man who picks up the phone while your hands are still steady, while your voice still carries, while the person on the other end can still hear you. Say it now, before the rubber band snaps.